Unless you've been living under a rock, then you're thoroughly aware of the Transformers and what they are. They've been around for quite literally longer than I can remember. They dropped in 1984. That's 4 years before I was even born. So they've been a part of my life forever, and I've been a huge fan for a long time. And they've just been growing in popularity ever since their release. But I would argue that over the past few years, their popularity has waned a little bit. Between the live action series is just growing a little long in the tooth. I think that it was time for these studios to try something a little new, a little bit different, which gives us Transformers 1, which is an animated film about the origin story of Optimus Prime and Megatron. And when I saw the very first trailer, I wasn't too happy. I wasn't very excited about what I was seeing. But then a second trailer dropped and it brought back hope. And it sounds like, by all accounts, this is starting to be fairly well received. And I have officially seen it, and I'm going to go ahead and give you guys my thoughts on it. As always, make sure to like, subscribe, comment. All of that helps our channel out a ton, so make sure to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And as always, visit criticless.com. We are your premier #1, the world's very best entertainment reviewing platform. Go ahead, hop in, and review Transformers 1 if you've seen it already. Let us know what your thoughts are. This is being directed by Josh Cooley, the guy who did Toy Story 4, and you feel it. This is kind of Transformers does Pixar. This movie is absolutely stacked. We've got Chris Hemsworth, Brian Tyree Henry, Scarlett Johansson, Keegan-Michael, Steve Buscemi, Lawrence Fishburne, and John Hamm. Now, back to the cast for a second. This is what had people a little nervous, especially in that first trailer. We got thrown into this world really quickly, and then we start to hear the voices, and it doesn't sound much like Optimus Prime. And it doesn't really sound like Megatron or Bumblebee or any of them really that we've got accustomed to over the years, but more specifically Optimus Prime. That voice is recognizable and has always been the same for as long as all of us can remember, and all of a sudden we've got Chris Hemsworth in here not even doing an Optimus Prime thing. So it makes sense that many of the fans were a little bit worried when they saw that at first glance, but I'm here to tell you after seeing it that it actually works, and it makes sense why they've handled it this way, because you don't forget, this is Transformers before the Transformers. This is the development of these characters, who and what they are, and actually you can audibly hear Chris Hemsworth change as the film progresses into becoming more of that iconic voice that we all know and love. Now, he doesn't one-for-one it or copy it, but all I'm saying is that they are clearly aware of what they are doing, and they're not trying to totally remake this or change it into something different. So if you've seen that in the trailers and were a bit worried, I'm here to say, at least personally, I wasn't bothered by this. This movie is just old school, classic filmmaking as far as the story goes. It's fairly simple, and it's not something that you've never seen before, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. Just like the trailers portrayed, this is a buddy movie, and it's one of those stories where you've got the good buddy and the bad buddy. Technically, this is a kid's film. You know, this is geared towards a younger audience. This isn't a story they've seen hundreds of times before, and it doesn't have to always break new ground every single time. And I would argue that we need a little bit of a return to form, because Hollywood seems to be in the mode of constantly creating something new, trying to remake the wheel of sorts, and it regularly doesn't work. So it makes sense that this is the trajectory that we would take, and it worked for me. They took an interesting approach, and Optimus and Megatron aren't even called that in this film when it starts. They're totally different names, which is Orion Pax and D16, and the same for the rest of the characters as well. This is very much them before they became them. When the film kicks off, these guys can't even actually transform. They're transformer-less. They're miners. They're guys that work down in the center of Cybertron. They have no cogs in the center of their chests like the other Transformers in the world that actually can transform. There's those with and those without. This is a very interesting approach for this franchise, and something we've never seen. And along with something we've never really seen up close is their home planet. It's Cybertron. And I can say that Cybertron looks really cool in this. It's really neat. The planet itself literally regularly transforms and moves around just like what we know the Transformers to do. And I think that that was a really neat idea. And And that brings up the art as well. I actually think that it looks quite well. This is a cool looking film. But while we're on the subject of how this film looks, I'm going to go ahead and touch in on my problems with it as well, because honestly, most of my issues do revolve around the way it looks. And the two complaints here are one being the characters' faces. They're these slick, smooth, metallic, I don't know, just kind of, I don't want to say featureless, because they do have a lot of expressions and you can read a lot into their eyes and how they rotate. But it just, there's something about that I didn't love, that kind of smooth look. I'm just not a huge fan of it, but it's clearly the way that they've leaned with this franchise. They can't really change it now, or as far as this franchise, this version of the story. And I don't hate it. It's just something I'm not necessarily crazy about. The other complaint I have is just kind of the automobile designs. They're not great. I don't love them. Now, granted, I've got Bumblebee here on the screen. I actually liked his design fairly well, but the other characters, they're okay, but it makes sense because they're not on Earth, so they can't look like Earth vehicles. But at the same time, I just wasn't over the moon about the designs. They're just very kind of futuristic and different looking. They still embody what you've known them to look like, and I will argue as well that many of the other characters, and when they start introducing them, some of them look very, very cool. It's just the main couple characters, I just wasn't as hot on their auto designs, but it's not a make it or break it, and this is gotta look different. It can't look like Earth cars because that wouldn't make sense. And one of the things we get on a lot lately is messages and messaging within films, and I'm here to tell you, thank God, there is not really anything inherently wrong with what they are trying to tell, the story they are telling here, which is great in comparison to a whole lot of other current Hollywood films. The message here is pretty universal, and one that, like I said, you've seen before, but also one that I don't consider dangerous for children, which has been a problem of late. The undercurrent of the message here is kind of just this haves and have-nots, the look at society and those who are being told something from authority and whether you are willing to question authority or not, and then when you do question it and get answers, what you are going to do in return and how you handle that. But I think that it's handled with a fair level of tact and lets you decide for yourself where you land on it. Now, granted, the film, yes, it does direct you, but these are also stories that we know have happened on Cybertron, but have never really seen them quite like this, and not on a large, big budget theater level thing. This is new. And so if you can't pick up from my tone and where I'm standing with everything about this movie, then I'll go ahead and say this isn't a franchise assassination, and actually I would argue that this is one of the best films in the franchise. Now, I've seen a lot of people already claiming that this is the best Transformers film ever, or the best one since the film from the 80s. I'm here to tell you that personally, that's not my opinion. I unapologetically love the original Transformers live action film directed by Michael Bay starring Shia LaBeouf. I think it's great. I love it. It's awesome. It's a ton of fun, and you're not going to get any complaints from me. I freaking love this movie. It's great. It's part of my childhood. Granted, well, I say childhood, more of my like adult-ish hood. It was like right after I graduated high school, but whatever. I freaking love it. I like it a lot, and so I'm not going to complain about it. The other one that I like a whole lot is Bumblebee. I think this is one that kind of went unnoticed. I love it. This is the 80s vibe. This is what I've been wanting from Transformers movies. So I would argue that that first Transformers film and Bumblebee, those two live action films are excellent, but this one, it rivals those. It's right in that cluster of movies. So either way, this is high praise, at least for me, for this franchise. I think that all three of these movies are great in their own right, and I think that this is a new way to kick off a franchise. And yes, if you weren't picking up what I was putting down, I said a new way to kick off a franchise, which is just the Transformers 1 franchise, this animated version of these films. I think that this is a way to kick that off. Now, this doesn't mean that this movie ends on a cliffhanger where it's Spider-Man, the animated movie that came out recently that was just ended on the world's biggest cliffhanger and we still haven't gotten a sequel to. No, this movie definitely closes itself out, but it opens itself up to carry on with this world, and I do have a lot of hopes for where this can go, because I want more of this. I want more of these movies. I think it's awesome. I had a blast. This was a great time. I took my son, and this is now officially, according to him, the best film ever made. You know that they've done something right when you get home and you've taken your kids to the movie and they get back to the house and they're dredging through all of their toy boxes and different little storage locations to try and find every Transformers toy that they've ever gotten over their life to then accumulate them and have a massive Transformers battle, which is exactly exactly what my son did this morning. That's where I found him, was just playing with Transformers and having an awesome time and just didn't want to go to school. And I don't blame him, because I wouldn't want to go to school and would rather play with Transformers too. And this also brings me to what type of movie this is, because I can actually definitively say that I'd call this like a boy movie. And that doesn't mean that girls can't enjoy it, but during the 90s and 80s and basically any time ever before the past probably 10 or 15 years, there were girl movies and boy movies, especially when it came to kids films. And my wife regularly uses this terminology when cartoons and things are on, and she'll be like, oh no, I don't want to watch that. That's a boy movie. I'm like, what does that even mean? And she's like, I don't know. It's the color palette. It's how it moves, the transitions, just everything about this. It feels like a boy movie. And that's kind of the same for this. I do understand that standpoint now a little more, that I've started looking at it since she's mentioned it, is this is a bit more of a boy movie. And I think that that's great, because they've kind of stopped making those. They're still making the girl movies, but they've kind of abandoned the boy movies to then just make them also girl brands / everybody brands. And this isn't a bad thing. And like I said, it doesn't mean that girls can't enjoy it. There are a lot of films like this that my daughter will end up watching and still likes a lot, but when my son saw the trailer for this, he was insisting. He's like, Dad, you got to take me to the theater. We got to go watch this movie. So as far as the nitty gritty on the performances with Chris Hemsworth, Brian Tyree Henry, Scarlett Johansson, Keegan-Michael Key, all of these people, the question is, how did they do? Do they embody the Transformers? And I can definitively say yes, they do. They do a great job, and I actually think it makes sense why they brought in this star power, is because these are people that were able to carry this movie and make these characters from versions of themselves, these young versions, to something new, to becoming who they are supposed to be. So I guess this leaves me with, where would you rate this? Where do you put this on a Criticless scale? And I've been thinking about this for a little bit and going back and forth. I was hanging in that most excellent rad range right in there. And honestly, I'm like, you know what? This is a most excellent movie. I had a blast. My son had a great time. And this was just a fun time at the movies. So at the very least, I'm somewhere in that middle 80s range. And more than anything, it's the perfect kid movie, family movie, or also if you're just a man-child like myself and love kids things and have never let go of all of your childhood passions. So if you're an adult and you love Transformers, also go see this. It's a lot of fun. It's PG, and it's easy to take them to. There's nothing that pushes the limits. Yes, it says ass a few times, but that's really kind of it, and it's funny and it works. Even the violence in this movie is actually, the violence itself is fairly understated for a Transformers movie. They don't, it's not wall to wall, but when it happens, it's good and it's exciting and it's worth watching. But this is more about the story, and it's very engaging and easy for kids to watch. And most importantly, take a look right there. This movie is 1 hour and 44 minutes long. It doesn't need to be 2 hours long, and it was just the right length. It held my son's attention, and I had to pee at one point, and he was like, Dad, I don't want to go with you to pee. And I was like, son, you don't have a choice, because I'm not leaving you in this movie theater alone, and I'm going to pee my pants. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know what you thought about Transformers 1, if you have seen it, and if you haven't, if you plan on seeing it. I want to know where everybody sits with this thing, but like I said, it's a most excellent from me. Oh. One more thing. This movie, it wins all of the points. All of the points, this image, it's summed up right here in this. Look, do you see the sun? Look at the sun right there. That is a synthwave sun. Yes, you heard me right. They gave Transformers 1 the sun for Cybertron. They made it a synthwave sun throughout the film. It's freaking sick. I've never seen that in a movie ever, so this wins all of the points for all of the movies ever, because we get a synthwave sun, which is also why I did this background for this episode, because there's a synthwave sun in this movie, and I love synthwave. If you haven't done it yet, make sure to just go ahead, throw us that sub. If you want to keep up on the latest on new movie reviews or controversial older films, then we're definitely the place to follow. And if you want to keep up with the latest in news from the entertainment industry, this is definitely the place to be, because I am covering stuff that no one else is. So go ahead, hop on Criticless, follow us down below, and we will see you again next time. Later.